Manji, I actually wanted to pick mind on thoughts on this. You've been a IAS officer, and you once said that if an IAS officer wants any riot can be controlled in 10 minutes or an hour or whatever. Would you say that about like one of the essays is about how fake news against migrants led to an exodus? Do you think the government can act with a large city and it could, or is it not?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, before I answer, congratulations, Dushyant, Osama, for this book. It's sort of become so much part of our lives, misinformation, fake news, alternative facts, whatever you'd like to call. But I think precisely for the reason that you just said, it's terrifying because fake news becomes the basis to feed into our prejudices, but then it also has so often spurred violence and targeted violence against communities, religious communities, castes, and so on. To your question, I mean, very briefly, I've looked very carefully. I've handled riots, what are called communal riots. I've also worked as a human rights peace worker, and I've also studied them. I believe that riots require three things. And the first is what I call the manufacture of hatred. Hatred is not spontaneous between people. People live together, they've lived together for generations and centuries. Something is done to foster hatred. And that manufacturing of hatred is precisely what we're talking about here. There's a second thing is also what I found is that in every riot you have people with weapons, daggers, Molotov cocktails, voter lists. This doesn't happen spontaneously. So there's also the planning of the logistics of the violence. But the third is the role of the state. And these first two are necessary but not sufficient. The state has to want the violence to continue. So even with the fostering of fake news and through fake news hatred, the state, if it wishes to, will still be able to control the violence. But one or two quick things that I wanted to throw into this discussion. Fake news has been around and the source of violence for a very long time. Going out of our country, the whole lynchings in North America for almost 60 years were almost entirely built around myths about black men having being sexual predators of white women. And that became the source of lynchings. And so it was the same sort of fake news. I'm saying this is long predating the digital. The digital medium has facilitated, but it's not the cause. And it's important to recognize that there's something else that has happened. And among many riots that I've looked at and studied, there are two which come to mind where fake news was spread. Bhagalpur, 1989 is one of the worst that we've seen. At least 2,000-3,000 people were killed. And it was, the entire violence was caused by a rumor that Hindu students in Bhagalpur town, in coaching centers and so on, have been killed. And that led to people being, Muslims being picked up in village after village and slaughtered. It turned out ek bachche ka baal bhi nahi hua tha. But how that rumor, long before there was any kind of internet, how that rumor spread in the course of hours literally and spread all across the district and became. And likewise was Mrs. Gandhi's assassination, the myth that Sikhs were distributing sweets and celebrating, again spread and became the reason. So, but coming more closely, just talk about 2 or 3 the idea of love jihad, which is again the same idea. In Uttarakhand, it became the basis not just for attacks, but for a call for ethnic cleansing, removing of all. It was all a fake idea. We were trying to do a workshop with my colleagues and others, where we tried to talk about prejudices. And this idea that love jihad is a really strange idea that Muslim men are, especially good-looking Muslim men, are picked up and trained to attract Hindu girls who obviously have nothing in their heads. And this strange idea has become so mainstream now. Chief ministers are talking about it. And so on, it has become a source of huge violence, and we're going pretty much the way that America, it became the principal reason for violence. So we are trying to do a workshop in my office, and one somewhat older colleague said, love jihad to hota hai. तो I said, अच्छा फिर आप कैसे? नहीं, मुझे मालूम है होता है, तो बहुत बार होता है. So I said, you tell me specific instances. He said, मैंने तो नहीं देखा. I said, how old are you? He said, 48 years. I said, 48 years, anywhere in your community where you worked, where, tell me one case. No, but I've seen it on social media, and it happens. And how it, and one last sort of example, why I was very recently, the last few weeks, 2-3 weeks, I was in the US and Europe after Israel-Palestine broke out. And I was deeply saddened to see how intellectuals and leaders in the global north have completely blocked out the suffering of the people in Palestine and only look at Israel and look at what is happening in Palestine as justified. So I was speaking out against this wherever I could in a university. And after I had spoken, the vice president of the university, and considered a high intellectual, he took me aside and he said, you don't understand. I said, what? He said, all Muslims hate Jews. So I said, okay, where is this coming from? And then he said, no, I just saw something on the social media where some Palestinian man is supposed to have called up his father, and he said, I killed 10 Jews. And the father said, well done, do some more. And I'm saying this is somebody who's considered an intellectual of very high standing, and this is what he is. So that brings me to the problem that I wanted to place here, is that while we must truth tell and we must expose facts that are false, my worry is that we still want to, we will believe regardless of the facts. And I was doing a training of senior police officers, DG, IG rank, and the same thing of prejudices against the Muslim community came up. And I kept giving them facts, and they said, hum nahi mante. I said, I'm telling you the facts. Nahi, hum nahi mante. Population, this, that, all the standard ones. I can give you 15 facts on each prejudice. But if you don't want to listen to Hindi में एक कहावत है कि सोए को तो आप जगा सकते हैं, जागे को कैसे जगाएं? वो मुझे प्रॉब्लम लगता है कि whereas we must do truth telling, and it's really important work that the authors have done, that you have done, that people like Zubair and so on are doing. But I think there's something more fundamental about our very educated people wanting to believe fake misinformation, which is transparently fake misinformation, because it feeds into our prejudices. So I think there's something more fundamental as a kind of civilizational crisis that we'll have to deal with.